FiveThirtyEight just announced their 2024 presidential election forecast less than 24 hours ago. And in today's video, I'll be going through this presidential election forecast, analyzing it, and generally saying what I agree with or what I disagree with. So first off, what does this FiveThirtyEight forecast believe will win the election? Right now, according to this forecast, Biden is expected to win 52 out of 100 times, while Trump is expected to win in 48 out of 100 scenarios. Essentially, when we're looking at the bar graph here, this is suggesting this is an extremely competitive election. You can see their odds are essentially 50-50. Now, I do right now believe that Trump is slightly favored to win the election, but FiveThirtyEight believes that Biden right now is slightly favored, though it is a very small difference. What we're seeing is that in this bar graph here are 1,000 scenarios generated by FiveThirtyEight to see that who is they expect to end up winning the election. The taller the bar indicates the more likely such a scenario would occur. We're seeing the tallest bar here is around Biden 282 to 284, which is what this bar generally represents, and it suggests that Biden is expected to win by a narrow margin. You can see that on the far end here, Joe Biden's best case scenario is Biden with 510 electoral votes, and Trump's best case scenario is Trump with 532 electoral votes. Essentially, Biden only carrying District of Columbia and Vermont. Now, obviously, both those scenarios are incredibly unlikely, and that's why they're pretty much on the far end, and they only have a single dot, right? 1 out of 1,000 possibility is not a great one. Generally, most of the possibilities are around Biden 300 to Trump 300 electoral votes. Both men are expected to generally carry under 300 electoral votes. We see about 50% of the median possibilities do suggest that this will be a close election. Now, without further ado, let's first look at the 2020 FiveThirtyEight forecast. In 2020, Biden was given an 89% chance of victory, and Trump was given just a 10% chance. Trump's best case scenario was just 328 electoral votes for Donald Trump. That was his absolute best case scenario, and just a slight overperformance of his 2016 performance. Biden's best case scenario is with Biden at 460 electoral votes, and the median possibility was Biden with about 350 electoral votes. So you can see that if you compare it with 2020, Biden's chances have drastically declined, while Trump's chances have drastically surged. However, Trump is currently at this point in time still slightly behind. Now, what does the latest polls indicate? The latest polls actually does indicate right now that Joe Biden is slightly behind Donald Trump. We see the aggregate, you can see that more polls believe that Trump is going to win the election and not Joe Biden. I'm just going to show you the polls here. Trump is ahead by about a 1% margin, and most polls do consistently indicate that Trump is slightly ahead, though albeit not by a substantial margin. However, you do have to take into consideration that Biden won the popular vote in 2020 by 4.5% or 7 million votes. That is a substantial underperformance for Joe Biden. However, FiveThirtyEight does believe that Biden's going to win the popular vote by 2.3%, a near identical margin to Hillary Clinton's final popular vote victory, which may not be enough, but this forecast believes it might be. Now, what does this forecast believe the final electoral tally would be? Right now, it predicts Joe Biden with 273 electoral votes on average, and Trump with 265. Kennedy has been quite consistent, stuck at 0 electoral votes. What's the trend? Well, it looks like this race is tightening, right? When the forecast initially began, Joe Biden was at 287 in April 1st. At his peak, Biden was at 302, now has tightened to about 273 to 265. It is a very close election, as I've just indicated. In the popular vote, Biden leads by 2.5%. 95% of possibilities you can see fall into this range. So it says that Biden could still hit an upwards of It still says Biden could hit an upwards of like 430 electoral votes, and Trump can do something similar. I don't really buy that. If you look at the popular vote here, it's most likely right now they predict that Joe Biden with a 2.5% advantage over Donald Trump. Realistically, I think that could be a bit tighter than 2.5%. I believe Biden will still probably prevail in the popular vote, but I think that Biden could win with by inside of 1%. The forecast does agree. It does say that Joe Biden or Donald Trump either could win the popular vote, which we'll get to later. Now, Kennedy's at 7.7%. So, this model does believe that Kennedy will end up doing worse than what the polls suggest. I agree. I actually think that Kennedy will be closer to 5%, not 7.7%. But nevertheless, this forecast does agree with my opinion that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. will do worse than what the polls suggest. Win probability, Kennedy has always been stuck at 0% essentially. Joe Biden right now 52%, Trump 48%. When this forecast initially launched, not really launched, but when this forecast was initially programmed, Biden had a 58% chance. So it has tightened a little bit over the past month or so. Now, who is favored to win each state? What we're seeing is that essentially, if you want to relay this map onto another cleaner map, Joe Biden's at 270, Trump is at 268. Guess how many electoral votes you need to win? 270. 269 is a tie. Essentially, this is saying that Joe Biden is just one electoral vote away from a tie. But why does it give Joe Biden this narrow edge? This model does predict that Joe Biden will win the three crucial Rust Belt states: Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And those are three keys for any presidential candidate to win a presidential election: Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, especially for a Democrat. However, it does believe that Joe Biden will lose three states he carried in 2020, one of them being Clinton state, the state of Nevada, and two other states he carried by less than 1% in 2020, Arizona and Georgia, according to this model. First off, if you just look at the safe states here, it's quite generic, right? If you just look at the safe states, it gives states like Montana, Kansas maybe as likely, or states like Washington, Oregon as likely, but we all know those states are going to go for their respective candidates. What really they're talking about as the most competitive states are these ones. These that are currently in gray, these are the most competitive states, and I'm going to show you through each of them how they analyze their results. First off, I'm going to go to the state of Nevada here. Right, Nevada is a state that Clinton won back in 2016. Biden won by 2.4%. Joe Biden is currently expected to lose the state of Nevada 55.6% of the time, and Trump is expected to lose 44.4%. It generally does predict, you can see the highest bar here does have Trump up by about 2. The median is around Trump up by 1. Polls consistently predict a Trump victory, and I guess that's part of the reason why they believe so. You can see that when the forecast was originally launched, Biden had a 51% chance, Trump had 50 because of rounding, but now Trump has about a 56 to 44% chance, or about a 5 to 4 if you talk about it in a ratio. Now, another state that we're going to be taking a look at here that is right beside Nevada that is also predicted to flip according to 538 is the state of Arizona. And now you see that this black line around it, right? This is a state that could be the tipping point state according to 538. Now, Trump is favored to win Arizona's 11 electoral votes, albeit by a very narrow margin. You can see the highest bar here suggests that Trump is going to win the state by less than 1%, a fraction of 1 percentage point. It's going to be a very tight race, according to 538. And I do agree. I believe that Trump is favored to win the state of Arizona, but it is a very tight affair. Nevertheless, here they do have Trump winning in both of these states. We go to the next state here, which is the state of Texas. Texas is considered slightly on the competitive end, but that Joe Biden is still expected to just win about 1 out of 5 times, and Trump is expected to win 4 out of 5 times. The highest bar here suggests that Trump is up by just around 10%, just under 10%, but nonetheless, he does win by a larger margin than his 6% win in the state of Texas back in 2020. Now, that is something that's quite agreeable. I believe that Trump will win the state by about 9 to 10 points, and this is one of the forecasts I definitely agree with for this map. Now, the next state here, the state of Florida, I realistically don't agree with the lean characterization. I think it's more likely that Trump will win it by a likely margin. The tallest bar here has Trump up by about 5 to 6. I think that Trump will end up winning the state by 7 to 8. It still says there's a lot of scenarios where Biden could win the state of Florida, and there's still realistic possibilities where Biden wins the state of Florida by 5%. I really don't buy it. I believe that Trump will easily prevail in the state. I believe Biden has less than a 10% chance of winning the state of Florida. Nevertheless, here, again, I'm going to respect their decision from 538. Now, another competitive state here, the state of Georgia, is another state that Joe Biden won back in 2020 by the skin of his teeth. Right now, it is also projecting here Trump winning 58 out of 100 times, Biden winning 42 out of 100 times. Essentially, in this state, they predict that Trump will win by 1.7%. Kennedy will get about 6% of the vote, Joe Biden at 46.1%. If you look at the win probability here, Biden has been underwater for most of the campaign, but nevertheless, here he is currently trailing by close to 2%, which is closer to about a lead margin now, and it does not show a generally favorable trend for Joe Biden. The next state here, North Carolina, this is probably, if Trump was to lose the state in 2024, the state that he won in 2020, that would be North Carolina. Right now, it's saying about 60-40 right now in favor of Donald Trump. Realistically, I think that's probably closer to 70-30. The reason being, he won the state. I don't think Trump is going to lose the state he won in 2020, number one. And number two, it just doesn't look like, again, based on the fact that Trump is leading in these polls by such substantial margins, that Trump is going to somehow end up losing the state. It's still a distinct possibility, but I just feel it's unlikely. And you see the tallest bar here suggests that Biden is actually winning the state of North Carolina. I don't agree. I don't think that there is a realistic possibility that Biden wins the state by 7 or 8. But again, I also don't think there's a realistic possibility that Trump wins the state by 15. Nevertheless, here, if you look at the popular vote, about a 2% gap between Trump and Biden, and Trump is at about a 60-40 advantage over Joe Biden. Again, I'm thinking about 70-30, but I do agree with the characterization, nevertheless. So if you go to Nebraska's 2nd district, Joe Biden is favored by about a 2-1 margin. I do agree here. I think that Joe Biden will probably win the district by about a 4% margin. That is something that's quite agreeable in my opinion. And this one district, it does matter in this map because of the fact that, again, right now Joe Biden's at 216, Trump is at 268. If Trump wins that district, he wins 269 electoral votes, enough to tie the election. Now we go to Minnesota here, another swing state. What we're seeing is that Joe Biden is favored to win the state heavily. The tallest bar has Biden up by about 9%. I think that this is more realistic, about a 4% margin for Joe Biden. And I do agree with, again, their prediction here, 4 to 5 point win for Biden. I think that is realistic. And now we go to the next state here, the state of Wisconsin. It predicts that Joe Biden has about a 5 to 4 advantage in the state of Wisconsin. The tallest bar has Trump winning by just 0.1 to 0.2%. I'd say that Trump probably wins by closer to 1 to 2 points, but right now I certainly can agree with this forecast that this will be an extremely competitive race. Right now, according to the polls, you can see a very tight battle between the two. Whoever wins the state of Wisconsin will most likely conquer this election and defeat the opponent. Essentially, Biden right now is leading by 1.3%, and Biden has consistently led the state of Wisconsin in terms of their forecast, albeit he was below 60% for most of this campaign. Again, I think that Biden will lose the state of Wisconsin, but I do agree it will be very close. Going to the state of Michigan here, what we're seeing is that Trump is still narrowly trailing Joe Biden. According to the polling, their forecast here, Biden is up by 1.8% over Donald Trump, which is again another tilt margin for Joe Biden. I honestly think the race will be tighter. I think that whoever wins the state will win it by less than 1%. And I think right now Trump is the favored one. But again, the model is still giving Trump a 42% chance of victory. And the tallest bar here suggests that Trump will narrowly win the state of Michigan. I personally think, again, I believe that Trump will win the state of Michigan probably by by 0.1 or 0.2%, to be honest. So I agree with this highest bar of the possible outcomes and combinations in this race. Finally, the state of Pennsylvania, 19 electoral votes. Joe Biden favored in the state narrowly, 56 to 44. I could see this, but right now I still give it to Trump by maybe 0.3 or 0.4%. It's still a very close race. Polling has it still narrowly in favor of Trump, but again, it's pretty much a neck-to-neck race. You see that Trump is behind Joe Biden by about 1.3%. I think that realistically, he's probably going to end up winning it by a very, very narrow margin, but nevertheless, I can still agree with it. So what conclusion do I have after looking through this forecast? I believe that's generally right, but I believe that, again, the three toss-up states, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, tilt slightly towards the former president and not the current president. So what are the closest races? Right now it says that Arizona is the closest. I could see it that way. I could see Trump winning it by the narrowest of all the states. However, right now, I believe that the closest three states are Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Especially Michigan and Pennsylvania. I think Wisconsin will go for Trump, but I think that those two states will be the most competitive. Now, I also agree that, again, Nevada's going to be quite close. I agree Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, these are some of the closest races. Probably these these 7 races, they're the closest 7 races, and the 7 races most likely to decide who ends up winning the general election. Now we go to a tipping point. Which state is most likely to be a tipping point state? Pennsylvania. I do agree with that prediction. Pennsylvania was a tipping point state, the state that put Joe Biden over 270 electoral votes back in 2020. I do think that that will probably be the tipping point state again in 2024. Now we go to this VPI, which is essentially the voter power index. Essentially, the higher the number, the more powerful the voter is in that state. Now, if you go to 0.0, it's the states that are pretty much not competitive, and also the states that have either a massive number of electoral votes or an extremely small one where their votes essentially do not matter. Right? If you look at the most powerful state, the state of Nevada, I agree. I think Nevada will be pretty much the most powerful state generally because of the fact that it's so close and that it's relatively sparsely populated. It's not very densely populated. It has less votes in general, and your vote really matters if you're in Nevada. And then we're seeing pretty much a close tie between New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, and Nebraska second, Michigan, right? These are the states where also your vote really, really matters. And I also kind of agree with that. I believe that those states are quite crucial in terms of the fact that the voters in those states have a very good say of who will be the next president of the United States. Now we go to the next part, the path to 270. Essentially, what is the path for both candidates to win 270 electoral votes? They believe whoever wins Wisconsin will probably win the presidency. I agree. I think Wisconsin will be the deciding state. This is probably the state where both sides really need to win, right? Trump can afford to lose Michigan. He can afford to lose Pennsylvania. If he wins Wisconsin, wins Arizona, wins Nevada, wins Georgia. He doesn't really need Nevada by then, but still, right? If Trump is wanting to win the election or Biden wanting to win the election, they probably need to stay Wisconsin. That's what this is showing. Whoever wins Wisconsin, more likely than not, will win the election. Biden can afford to lose Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, but he must hold on to Rust Belt 3, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Nebraska's 2nd district in the process, and also Minnesota and New Hampshire. Right? What we see is that these are the most competitive states. Trump will probably win Florida, he'll win Ohio, Texas for sure, and he'll probably win North Carolina. So these are the states, these lightly shaded states: Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, Georgia, and North Carolina. According to this model, and according to pretty much everyone's expectations, will decide who wins the election. So finally, we look at the scenarios. Either candidate winning in a landslide. I personally don't believe that's very likely at this point. Biden wins 350 or electoral votes or more, 22%. Honestly, I think it's closer to something like 5%, right? In 2020, Biden had pretty much a very high approval rating. He had a 8% lead in polling, and he only won 306 electoral votes. So I don't think he's going to win 350 in this election. Trump winning more than 350, honestly, I think that's a bit more likely than Biden winning 350, but I mean, Democrats have a lot of safe states, right? They're safe electoral votes. California's 54, the West Coast is essentially 74 electoral votes. New England delivers them more than 100. It's going to be really hard for a Republican to win a landslide at this point in time. So I'd say that both of those events are highly unlikely. 538 does agree that both events are unlikely, but I think that they're being generous with their probabilities. If anything, these are on the higher end. Biden wins with less than 350. Trump wins with less than 350. Honestly, I think this is the most likely scenario. Trump wins with less than 350, and then it's this one, and then it's this one, and then it's this one, right? Now, going to Biden winning the popular vote, Trump winning the popular vote, I do believe Biden will win the popular vote. I think this assessment is fair, about 63 to 37. I do believe that. Again, you're seeing that RFK is not on this forecast. Why? Because again, 538 sees it. neither of them believes that, again, RFK has any realistic shot of actually winning the presidency. Biden wins majority, Trump wins majority in national vote. I agree that's probably not going to happen because of the third parties. Biden wins by more than 10%, Trump wins by more than 10%. I think right now what's the most likely to happen to popular vote is somewhere between a Trump plus 3 to a Biden plus 5. Most likely, it's going to be somewhere between Trump plus 2 and Biden plus 3. So again, those are highly improbable events, and 538 does agree. Biden wins the popular vote but loses the Electoral College. Trump wins the popular vote but loses the Electoral College. We have seen that this is an extremely unlikely scenario. No Republican has ever won the popular vote but lost the Electoral College. And I do believe this 1% characterization does do it justice. It's a very improbable event. Biden wins the popular vote but loses the Electoral College. Again, that is always a distinct possibility on the table. Right, Al Gore won the popular vote by 500,000. He lost the Electoral College. Hillary Clinton won it by 3 million, and she still lost the Electoral College 306 to 232. Every state votes for the same candidate as it did in 2020, less than 1% out of 100. I honestly think it may be a bit higher, but again, I do think that is very unlikely. No candidate wins a majority of the Electoral College votes. We've already established that RFK Jr. is not winning any Electoral College votes, so that is quite unlikely. A tie is also quite unlikely according to 538. It's only a 4 out of 100, and I do agree. Every election is decided by a recount. That is possible, in my opinion. The election is decided by a smaller vote share than the ones received by a third-party candidate. Yeah, I do believe that is probable. Biden wins at least one state he did not win in 2020, 51%. I think that is quite generous for Biden. I really don't see opportunities for him to flip a state other than North Carolina. He has not put in any focus in any other state. Right, Florida, he has given that state up. Texas is characterized as likely, and Democrats are really not running in that state. Iowa, Ohio, you can forget about it. Nebraska second. First off, it's not technically a state. And number two, I don't think Joe Biden's going to flip that district. So honestly, I think that is a bit generous for Biden. Trump wins at least one state he did not win in 2020. I think if anything's closer to about 85 to 90%, I think it's very likely that Trump will win at least one state he did not carry in 2020 because he has so many opportunities. Trump is on offense. Biden is on defense. Biden's on defense in Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, just to name the most competitive. He might be on defense in Minnesota, might be on New Hampshire, might even be on Maine at this point in time because Trump still has a 20% chance of winning that state. So again, right, Trump is on defense in less states. North Carolina, Florida, maybe. Texas, maybe. Iowa, Ohio, maybe, but that's a pretty big if. And after that, you don't really see many areas where Trump is actually on defense. So in the summary, what does this model show? For one thing, it shows that the election will be extremely competitive. Essentially a position that I definitely agree with. I think that this election will be extremely competitive and that both candidates definitely have a realistic chance of winning this election. However, I do believe that Trump is currently favored and not Biden, though 52 to 48 essentially is a mathematical tie. Nevertheless, I think right now Biden is slightly trailing Trump in terms of the possibility that Biden ends up winning. I think, in my opinion, Trump is leading about 65 to 35. But again, this is still a very competitive election, and don't be complacent. In November, go and get out and vote. Thank you for watching. Have a nice day. Goodbye.